Hey you guys, thanks for tuning in. This is part 2 of the JJRC H8C All the Best Mods. Now in the first episode we talked about bracing your rotor shafts here. We also talked about a battery mod, a better battery. We also talked about the landing gear and also a few other things. What I'll do is I'll put the link in the description for the first part of all the best mods, so you can check that out. Today we're going to talk about installing new motors. I'm going to go ahead and put in all 4 motors. Also some upgraded bearings I got from eBay. These are Boca bearings, and I'll go ahead and put the link in the description for these as well. And also what we're going to do today is a top cover mod where we'll actually, there's so many screws to take off the cover on this guy. If we just make a incision in the top cover, instead of taking the whole top cover off to change a motor, what we'll do is we'll just make an incision here, so we only have to move, take off the end part of the cover for each motor. The H8C has actually had some problems with motor failures because it is a 7.4 volt. It is more prone for motor failures, and unfortunately that's just part of this quadcopter. It just has that issue. But anyway, let's get started. So first what we're going to do is take off all the screws to get to the motors themselves and the top cover. So here we go. So what you'll notice is when you take off these propeller screws, the prop screws, the shaft and the bottom gear are just going to kind of fall out. In my first video I mentioned these feet that are actually stabilizers for the motor shaft, and also they help with some vibration. And these are just kind of stuck in there really gently, so I'm just going to pull those out first. Start the removal process. So now it should all come apart. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so just remember the red stripes on top are the front, and you can tell the back by the battery door here. So we want to put that on the same way when we reassemble. Okay, so looking at the motors, they're basically just pushed in. I'm going to go ahead and cut these motor wires and actually solder in JST connectors. So let's remove the motors, and let's remember, actually we're going to do it one at a time so we don't mix up the clockwise and counterclockwise direction of the motor. And also in this view you can also see the bushings we're going to be replacing with these bearings. Okay, so let's go ahead and remove this first motor. This whole assembly should just pop out. And the motor comes out. Just pulls right out here. And keeping note of the blue and red wires, just to make sure we get the right motor. Okay, so I got my 4 JST males and 4 JST female connectors here. Now the wire is a little bit thicker on these, so I'm going to try to trim the wire down as close to the connector as possible, just to save weight. This will add a tiny bit of weight to this, maybe a gram per connector or so. So you're looking at adding a tiny bit of weight, but for convenience sake, I think it's probably going to be worth it. And I probably won't know the difference, especially since down the line I'm going to actually take a little bit of material off of the top of the motor and the back of the motor here just for better motor cooling. So we're putting some in, we're taking some out, and so it should kind of equal out. So we're going to cut the motor off. Okay, so something to remember is to not run the motor wires through this little hole in the plastic casing, because when you do this mod you're not going to be able to easily get them out. I kind of screwed up there. I should have not run them through here, so I'm going to have to resolder this one. So good tip, leave these wires out of the hole so that when you do have your new motor you can just pull it out and unplug it and you're good to go. If it's running through here and you have these connectors, obviously you're not going to be able to get it out. So food for thought. So we're going to redo this solder connection. Be careful when you are stripping these. You want to hold that wire really tight. You don't want all the stress to be pulling on the motor. You might pull the wire right out of the motor, so just be careful there. Flux and solder to tin the wire before we lock them together. Now for those of you who don't know how to solder, this is actually a really good tutorial on how to learn how to solder. It's very basic. Just make sure you get the solder to soak in the wire on both ends. Only cut as much wire as you need because you want that insulation. Okay, both sides soldered. Want to push up our shrink wrap. When you're soldering, you want to make sure that your shrink wrap is far enough away, as far away as possible from the soldering area, because if you have it too close, the wire will heat up and it will start to shrink, and then you can't push it back on. So after that's done, I usually like to take a lighter and just don't put the flame on it, just put it just underneath and work it back and forth a little bit. Flip it over. Same thing on the other side. And then since these wires are so tiny, I'm just going to pinch the ends of this just to get a better seal on that. Okay, that guy's done. Alright, so same thing on all the other motors. Got the bearings in with a little bit of this synthetic bearing lubricant, just a drop on each bearing. And this is how it's going to look when it goes in. You just match up the notch, push it down in, just like that. Push the connector down in wherever it fits. And there we go. That's one motor, a set of bearings, and a JST connector for easy motor change. Once this motor burns out, pull it out, solder a new JST or unsolder this one, put that on the new motor, and you're ready to go. You don't have to unsolder this side, and also it'll keep you from damaging the actual board here. A lot of guys are soldering and unsoldering from the board, and eventually you might cross connections, or there's so much heat here that you might damage something on the board. So I think this is a good thing to do just for safety reasons, and it adds just a little bit of weight. So we'll just do that for all 4 motors. You don't have to put the JST connector on if you don't want to. You could go ahead and do the unsolder here and solder the new one right to it. If you're good enough at soldering and you can do detailed soldering on circuit boards like that, that's fine. I chose to just do it this way just in case, and to make it a little bit easier. You are still going to have to solder on a JST connector, but as far as the board side, if you got the time, I think this is a good way to go. Or you could also just cut the wire, solder the wire at midpoint, and put on a couple of shrink wrap tubing, same thing. Or if you didn't want to use shrink wrap tubing, get yourself some of this brush on electrical tape, do a little brushing on each side, and that should also seal it. You just got to make sure this dries. So either way, there's 3 ways you can do it. I chose this way. So let's go ahead and get all the rest of the motors done. Okay, I noticed on one of the counterclockwise motors that the motor was really stuck in here, and I think it may have burnt out and melted into the plastic when it burnt. So I'm trying to ease it out with a pair of pliers. It seems like it's really melted in there. There we go. Just had to twist it and break that seal. Okay, so it looks like it did melt. So the new motor, let's see how it seats in. It doesn't seem like it's as tight now as the other motors. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little dab of super glue just before I push it in. Now it'll be a little more difficult to come out when I want to pull it out, but I just have to pull it out the same way if it ever burns up again with a pair of pliers and just yank it out. But at least I know it won't be spinning in there by accident. So on this one here, I decided to just go ahead and solder straight to the existing wires. Just going to cut them and go ahead and solder. And eventually I'm going to have to change these motors again, and I just want to see which way is right. There's probably going to be a little bit of a weight difference in the arms, just a tad, probably less than a gram, so I don't think it'll make a difference. The quadcopter gyroscope will make up for the difference. And also when I'm running the larger battery, it's already a little bit out of stock balance anyway, so there shouldn't be a problem there. So I'm going to go ahead and just solder these two together and see how it works out. Also on this motor installing the new motors, I'm not going to put any kind of motor lube in the motors. There's been talk that it's good and bad. I'm just going to go ahead and try the break-in technique where you just really slowly run the motors for about a few minutes instead of giving it full power, and that's supposed to wear in the brushes a little better and make them last a little longer. So maybe next time I replace these, I'll go ahead and try it with some motor spray, but this time I'm just going to go without it. Also, when you're soldering, I always try to, when you're finished with your solder and it melts, you always want to try to, if it's pointed, just try to get it kind of rounded, so just in case in the future it doesn't kind of poke through the heat shrink tubing and you have a short. Whichever way you decide to do it, you could either solder from wire straight to wire, or you've got this way, which is JST connector to JST connector. Pretty much the same amount of time. Actually, this is going to take you a little longer initially, and then when you do have to replace your motor again, it should be about the same amount of time because you only have to solder on one side. Also, when you are doing the shrink wrap tubing with the lighter, just make sure you're not burning any of the plastic on the quadcopter or the electronics. Just make sure. I like to tilt it this way, make sure the flame is clear of anything, and then go ahead and do it. So just to make it a little bit balanced, I'm going to go ahead and put a JST on this side as well. I did the wire to wire solder on these two sides. I'm going to do JSTs on these two sides and see which one works better in the long run. Okay, so all the motors are soldered on. We opted for 2 with JST connectors and 2 just straight wire solders. And over the months we'll see which is the best way. Once the motors need to be changed and we need to pull some out, we'll see which way is the easiest and I'll stick with that. Okay, so while we got the top off, I'm going to go ahead and drill some cooling vents for the motors just to keep them a little cooler than normal, since they do tend to wear out and burn out. Can't hurt to keep them a little cooler. So what we want to do is drill out the top portion. I'm going to be drilling out a cooling vent here, and then also in the back, just an extra cooling vent. It looks like there's just these little tabs that actually hold the motor. And drilling out these 2 sections won't actually affect how the motor is held in place. So we need to get a drill. It would really help if you have one of these self countersinking attachments to it, because once you get to a certain length, it'll bore out and bore out a little larger diameter for you. From the top, you just kind of want to center it right on this portion here. Okay, so we got a nice hole in the top right there. Try not to take away too much material and break this joint here. You might lose a little bit of integrity on the motor there. So there's our second hole on the side, and there's the top. Those are the stock vents. So you're gonna get a little bit of plastic scrap around the edges. So just take an X-Acto knife and just go ahead and cut that off. Okay, so once you've cleaned that up, go ahead and do the same thing for other corners. And then we're going to move on to the next portion of the mod while we have the cover off, and that's going to be removing the arms so it's easy to change individual motors. Just cut along this edge here. You can actually go as far back as you want, but I chose to just go the furthest back. You want to leave this screw hole here so there is some bracing. You wouldn't gonna, I don't think you would want to go farther back than this. So I'm just going to go right up to this ridge here. So you just get your X-Acto knife, and the first part is a little difficult. Once you surpass that initial ridge, it just cuts like butter. It's really smooth. And there we go. So basically, it's going to look as nice as you can cut straight. So if you don't cut it super straight, you're going to have a little bit of a curvature like that. But once it's all together, I don't think you'd even be able to see it. If you wanted to cover it up, make it look nice when the quad's all together, I'm sure you could put some kind of white tape over it if you wanted to, or something like that. Okay, it looks like we're pretty much done with everything. We got the bearings in, we got the new motors in, we tried out the JST connectors. We're gonna give those a try, see how those work. We got two motors with just a straight solder job. We went ahead and cut the top cover so it's easy to replace individual motors without taking the entire cover off. And let's put it all back together and see how it works. Okay, we got all of the arms on. Now it's time for the top of the body. Not too bad. You can kind of see the cut area on each arm just a little bit. But if that bothers you and you don't mind taking off the entire body for replacing one motor, then you don't have to do it. Or if you do want to do it and you want to cover it up, maybe try and maybe you could put a little bit of white fabric tape on there, something really light and thin, just to cover up that seam. Up to you. If you're worried about the integrity of the cuts on the arms on the top cover, of course if you're pulling down on them, they're going to move a little bit. But all the force is pulling the quadcopter up, so all the force is actually going to be going up this way, and it's definitely very solid. Okay, so now we're going to install the motor shafts, the prop shafts, and the propellers. And if you're worried about the way, if you forgot the way your propellers go, all you got to do is look at this directional arrow here, and this will tell you which way the motor turns. And if you think about it, the direction the motor turns, you want it to grab air. So you want it to push air down. So this motor is turning clockwise, and you want the front edge that's spinning to be higher than the back edge so that it can grab the air and push it down. So this one would go here. If you ever want to magnetize your screwdriver, just go ahead and hit it on a magnet, or even if you also just hit two screwdrivers together sometimes, it'll actually magnetize it, which will help you put your screws in. Alright, props are on, landing gear's on. Let's go ahead and put in a battery and see if this thing is all working correctly. As far as I can see, they are. They all look pretty good. What I did forget to do is I forgot to put in these stabilizer guards here. So I'm just going to shove these in real quick. These are the braces for the motor shafts, just to give it a little bit more bracing on and to keep the gears from stripping, and also to take off some of the shock. I talked about this a little bit more in depth in my part 1 video, so if you guys haven't seen the part 1, I'd recommend go check out the part 1 for a little bit more information on this. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to do on this little quad is I'm going to modify the battery compartment door just a little bit. With this aftermarket upgraded 950 mAh battery, it fits in great, nice and tight, slides all the way back once you remove the post back there inside. The only thing is the door is really tough to close. You can try to shove these cables in all the way back, but what I'm going to do just to make it a little easier is I'm going to go ahead and cut a couple of holes right here so these leads can just kind of hang out and I can connect them and disconnect them easily, which, you know, doesn't look the best, but for this type of battery it's just going to make it a little bit easier to work with. So I'm just going to drill a couple of holes. And there we go. So what I'd recommend is after you put your new motors in, or if you're just getting your H8C, go ahead and do this for a few minutes. Don't even take off. Just let it run like this for a while. Okay, anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. For more videos like this, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. And go ahead and hit a thumbs up if you liked it. This will be part 2 of the JJRC H8C All the Best Mods. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.